Welcome to the deep dive. We unpack complex topics, try to make them accessible.
Right.
And today we are diving into just one source, but it's pretty potent, an audio excerpt called Mass Awakening Will Destroy the Elite Parasites.mp3.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our goal here isn't about agreeing or disagreeing with it, right?
No, absolutely not.
It's really about understanding the narrative it's pushing. We want to pull apart its structure, look at who it calls the enemy, who the hero is, and what it says is at stake.
Exactly.
So, yeah, the mission for this deep dive,
Yeah.
really explore the specific worldview packed into this audio.
Okay.
We're going to identify the main fight it describes, who gets cast as the bad guys,
The villains, yeah.
who is the champion, and what hangs in the balance according to this source. The aim is, for you, listening, to get a clear picture of the message and, importantly, how the language, which is very specific, very vivid sometimes,
Definitely vid.
how that language frames the fight and tries to, well, rally people.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how it constructs this reality. It's very specific, almost like a closed loop. You've got clearly defined enemies. There's only one way to win, apparently, and a really strong moral angle.
Okay.
So we'll be digging into the rhetorical tricks, the analogies it uses, those are powerful, and the emotional buttons it tries to push.
Right.
Which brings up a key question for us, I think. How does this kind of narrative try to motivate its audience, or maybe even, misinform them? It's about seeing the mechanism underneath.
Got it. Okay, let's start unpacking. The source jumps right in, sets a really dramatic scene. It paints a world that's like constantly under attack. What does it tell us about this enemy and the warfare happening?
Well, it immediately lays out this idea of a daily assault. The speaker says, quote, "You've seen the enemy attack us every day."
Every day.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's immediate, it's constant, and it's not vague. It's characterized by specific things, the lies intensifying and economic warfare.
Okay, so specific types of attack.
Exactly. It frames the whole conflict not as some abstract political thing, but as a real, tangible threat affecting people right now. Creates this feeling of, constant urgency. You have to be vigilant.
And it gets super specific about who this enemy actually is, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It goes beyond just ideas to naming names, defining groups. Who are they pointing fingers at?
Oh, absolutely. First, there's this broad they. They are trying to destroy Donald Trump and his family and his companies.
Okay, so personalizing it right away.
Right. Then it names names. Hillary Clinton, John McCain, figures representing, established opposition in that context.
Familiar targets.
Then it hits media outlets, cowards at CNN, MSNBC it calls them, and then dismisses all these wannabe tough guys. Just sort of a blanket insult.
Right, trying to diminish them.
Yeah, but then it broadens out again. You get foreign leaders like Kim Jong-un and all these scumbags, and this very vague but kind of loaded phrase, some other mother person with the left worshiping him.
Huh. Vague but pointed.
Exactly. And then there's this internal enemy, too. All the trendies who are raised in an open, free country and have no respect for it.
Okay, so betrayal from within, kind of.
That's the implication. It's this mix, you see. Specific, known people, but also these broad catch-all categories. It makes the enemy seem both concrete and like it could be anyone, anywhere. Very adaptable threat.
So it's not just who they are, but the narrative gives a reason why they're doing this. What's the big motivation it assigns to all these different adversaries? How does that shape the stakes?
According to the source, their motivation is pretty stark. They want to see everybody collapse and be poor so they can secure their dominance over us because they're such cowardly pieces of crap.
Wow, okay, that's direct.
Very direct. It's not just about politics. It's framed as this fundamental battle for whether people will be okay economically, socially.
Yeah, survival, almost.
Exactly. And by painting the motive as so malicious, wanting everyone poor, wanting dominance because they're cowards, it just wipes away any possibility of nuance or finding common ground.
Yeah, no room for compromise there.
None. It sets up this really clear us versus them, good versus pure evil, essentially. Simplifies everything down to a moral fight. And that kind of framing, well, it's powerful because it gets rid of ambiguity. Makes it easy for listeners to pick a side and feel that intense urgency.
You mentioned the language is vivid, almost cinematic. What specific ways does the speaker ramp up that dramatic feeling? Beyond just listing enemies.
That's a really good point. It's not just what is said, but how. There's a lot of hyperbole, very emotionally charged words, like, phrases like lies intensifying or calling people cowardly pieces of crap. Those aren't neutral descriptions. They're designed to spark strong feelings. anger, maybe disgust, fear.
Yeah, you react to those words.
Definitely. And that's boosted by constantly repeating the idea of being attacked every day. It creates this feeling of being under siege relentlessly.
Right.
And by painting the opposition as not just wrong, but morally rotten, cowardly,
Oh.
it basically demonizes them, makes it almost impossible to see their perspective or feel any empathy. It conditions the listener to see it not as just a political difference, but as this critical life or death fight against, well, truly evil forces.
So, after defining this enemy in such stark terms, the source naturally presents a hero figure to counter them. Who is that hero, and how's their struggle depicted?
Yeah, the hero figure is very clearly Donald Trump. The source calls him a hero going up against the most evil people.
Right.
And his struggle isn't just about facing challenges, it emphasizes the huge personal sacrifices he's supposedly making.
That's ass.
Well, the speaker claims he's lost over $1 billion right now.
$1 billion.
Yeah, and spent $200 million of his own money plus. The focus on losing money, spending his own money, it's meant to show he's pure, dedicated, not in it for himself, but for some bigger cause.
And there's that really striking analogy used to capture just how hard this fight is supposed to be. With a mudslide, right? It creates a very strong visual.
Yes. The mudslide analogy is central, really. The speaker says Trump is like on a mudslide on all these boards in this logjam trying to get the country balanced while all these enemies hit him from every sickening angle.
That's quite an image.
It is. A mudslide suggests these overwhelming, chaotic forces, right? A desperate fight for control against something you can barely stop.
Yeah, instability, danger.
And the logjam implies this really tangled, difficult problem that only someone incredibly strong and determined could even try to fix.
Okay.
So the analogy really highlights the hero's supposed toughness, his unique effort against these huge odds. It's designed to make you admire him, feel sympathy for him.
Right.
And even while he's doing this incredibly tough thing, the source adds he's doing it in a suit with a great look wife and, great family, smart wife, great family, Christian family.
So adding this layer of conventional respectability on top of the struggle.
Exactly. Virtue, stability, family values, reinforcing the heroic image.
It's interesting, too, how the source then reaches back into history, draws a parallel to really cement this heroic status using a core American myth. Who's he compared to, and why that comparison?
He's compared to George Washington.
Okay, the ultimate founder figure.
Right. The source praises Washington for leading this ragtag force to beat the British Empire. And then this is the key part for leaving power, refusing to become a king.
The selfless Cincinnatus idea.
Precisely. That act of giving up power is presented as the ultimate proof of selfless service. So by making that comparison, the narrative tries to lift the hero up to that same level, a founding father figure, fighting for liberty, serving the nation without personal ambition.
And then contrasting that with...
Contrasting it sharply with those cowardly pieces of crap mentioned before, the ones who, in this story, just want dominance and power for themselves, not for the people, and who would never step aside. It really locks in the hero's role as the liberator fighting against would-be tyrants.
Okay, this is where it gets, I think, really fascinating. The source ties this whole individual struggle directly to the condition of America itself. How does it describe the nation state? And what's the specific job of the hero and his movement in that picture?
It describes the state of the nation in 2016 in incredibly stark, almost medical terms.
Clinical.
Yeah. The speaker says they described it back then as America on its deathbed, even stronger, in cardiac arrest. The nation's heart wasn't beating.
Wow, that's dire.
Extremely dire. It's a powerful metaphor, right? Paints a picture of a country just moments from total collapse, needing immediate life-saving intervention.
And in that emergency room scenario.
In that scenario, Donald Trump and what the source calls the Liberty Movement are cast as the defibrillators.
The paddles, jolting it back to life.
Exactly. It positions them as the only thing capable of reviving this dying nation. Gives them this absolutely critical life-saving function.
So what are the specific ailments, the cardiac arrests, that the source says Trump and the movement are trying to fix with these defibrillators?
It lists several key problems they're supposedly tackling. Things like trying to stop the crime in the black neighborhoods.
Okay.
And the speaker adds, really significantly, that it's racist not to address this, which is a powerful framing.
Yeah, flipping the accusation.
Right. Also, trying to get jobs into poor people across the country and working to cut off these globalist programs that have shut us down.
So crime, poverty, And this idea of globalist interference.
Yeah, it's this diagnosis covering internal social issues, the economy, and these perceived external threats. The narrative basically says, without the hero stepping in, these things would kill the country.
Right.
And it offers this single drastic cure. These interventions are presented as absolutely essential for national survival.
So, okay, we have the enemy, the hero, the diagnosis of the nation. It all builds towards something for the listener. There's a call to action eventually. But first, what are the ultimate stakes here? What happens if this fight is lost, according to this source?
Well, the speaker talks about it with a lot of personal weight. They say, I know what it means if we lose. Now, they don't spell out every single detail of the disaster, but based on what was said earlier about the enemy.
Wanting everyone poor and dominated.
Exactly. The implication is, if the enemy wins, people will collapse, become poor, and then the enemy gets to secure their dominance over us. So it's not just losing politically, it's this threat of mass poverty, being controlled, losing all freedom. It builds this sense of, like, existential dread.
Yeah, it feels like a last stand.
That's the feeling it tries to create, a desperate fight against total tyranny.
And you can really hear that urgency, that personal investment from the speaker themselves. How does that come across? It seems like it really affects them personally.
Oh, absolutely. They really lean into their personal stake. They mention spending less time on the news now, maybe 4 or 5 hours a day instead of 10 hours.
Still a lot, but less.
Right, less for them. And choosing to spend more time with their kids instead. It's a small detail, but relatable, and it shows the heavy mental burden of living in this perceived reality.
Yeah, the toll it takes.
And they say, with real conviction, I already know too much, quite frankly. I mean, it's too upsetting because I know this is real. I know this fight's real. I know we're real.
That repetition of real is striking.
It is. It conveys this deep, almost painful certainty about the struggle. It tries to give the whole narrative this feeling of authenticity, urgency for the listener. Like, this isn't just talk. This is the undeniable truth, and it comes at a cost.
And that intense personal belief also seems to fuel a kind of contempt for people who aren't as deeply invested. Right?
Yeah.
What does the source say about these bandwagoners?
Yeah, there's clear dismissal of bandwagoners, people who just tune into the power, who want to be associated with a winning team, but don't really get the real fight.
So, questioning their motives.
Exactly. The speaker asks rhetorically, who cares about a winning team? How does that affect you? Unless you own stock in it or whatever, unless your family plays on the team. It's a way of shaming people seen as only superficially involved.
Right.
And it contrasts them with the true believers who understand the huge stakes. It works to strengthen the bond among those who feel they are truly committed, the real fighters, while maybe pushing listeners to deepen their own engagement.
And despite all the difficulty, the personal cost, what's the ultimate goal here? The grand vision the source lays out for this movement. It sounds like it goes way beyond just one country.
It really does. The ultimate goal stated is huge. Starting to turn the planet around.
Turn the planet around.
Yeah, that elevates the whole thing from just a national political struggle to this massive, global, almost cosmic battle.
Right.
It positions the movement, the hero, as the key force that won't just save America, but will actually change the entire world's direction. It really magnifies the importance of the fight and the role of everyone involved.
So finally then, what's the direct ask? The call to action for you, the person listening, in the middle of this huge planetary fight. How are you brought into this story?
It wraps up with this very direct, very empowering appeal for backup, for solidarity. The speaker says, we need your prayers and support now more than ever because we are the resistance to the global tyranny. You are the resistance.
You are the resistance. That's powerful.
It's not passive. It's like an enlistment. By saying we and then immediately shifting to you are the resistance, it pulls the listener right into the core identity of the movement.
Wants you part of it.
Exactly. It gives you agency, responsibility. You're not just watching. You become an essential, active soldier in this collective fight against global oppression. It makes the stakes incredibly personal and the call to action feel, well, almost unavoidable.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive has really given us, I think, a very complete picture of this source's specific narrative. It's so clear how every piece, the enemy descriptions, the hero portrayal, the role for the listener, it's all carefully built to fit into this massive, urgent, existential battle.
Yeah, what we've just walked through is really a textbook example of how you construct a narrative like this. You identify big problems, you assign blame to very clear scapegoats,
Right.
you present a singular hero figure, and you map out a very specific path forward. And understanding how these narratives work is so important, really, no matter what you personally think of the claims being made.
Why is this so crucial?
Because these stories, these narratives, they often have a huge impact on public discussion,
Hmm.
how people see the world, and ultimately what actions they take together.
Yeah. This deep dive definitely reveals a perspective that's, well, highly charged. It's full of really strong beliefs, that vivid imagery we talked about.
Hmm.
It really challenges you, the listener, to see the world through this very specific lens: good versus evil, hero versus villain, freedom versus tyranny. It shows how language, how carefully chosen metaphors can turn complex situations into something that feels like an urgent moral duty. So, as you think about all this, here's something to maybe chew on. How did these kinds of deeply felt, very emotional narratives, especially the ones using powerful analogies like that mudslide or the nation in cardiac arrest, how do they actually shape how we all understand what's happening around us? And maybe what role do you play, maybe without even realizing it, in how these stories spread or how they're resisted?
A really important question to consider.
Definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.